All right, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Pat McCormick from Millennial Media, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss mobile viewability. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started with the presentation. So today's webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will get a copy of both the slides and the recorded webinar via email over the next few days. All the lines on this teleconference are muted, but we'd still love to hear from you should you have any questions or comments. To submit questions or comments, please use the WebEx chat function, as we'll have time in the agenda at the end to cover Q&A. So once again, my name is Pat McCormick. I'm the Vice President of Publisher Sales at Millennial Media, and thank you so much for joining us today. Viewability is an incredibly important concept for today's mobile publisher. Whether you're an app developer, a mobile web publisher, you've likely noticed that viewability is a hot topic in our industry. So what exactly is a viewable impression? And what does this new focus on viewability mean for publishers, app developers, and all of those who earn revenue from mobile advertising? Next slide, please. So let's go through today's webinar objectives. We'll spend the next 30 minutes or so breaking down mobile viewability. By the end of today's session, we hope to accomplish 3 things. Number 1, provide publishers with a better understanding of mobile viewability. Number 2, let mobile publishers know why they should care about mobile viewability. And lastly, outline some concrete next steps that publishers can implement to make viewability part of their mobile revenue strategy. Next slide. So mobile is quickly becoming the most addressable, measurable, and transparent media. Viewability is at the very foundation of mobile advertising's continued growth. You can make the case that without viewability, nothing else really matters. KPIs like click-through rates and conversion rates and other engagement metrics are all moot if the ad itself is not viewable to the consumer. So this sets up a very simple equation of more viewable ads equals more value to advertisers, which drives more revenue for publishers. And at the end of the day, viewability is really about trust. It's the trust between the publisher and the advertiser. And marketers have the right to believe that their paid ad campaigns are viewable to consumers. This trust is critical to the growth of our industry and to your ability as a publisher to build lasting relationships with advertisers. The following slides and the rest of today's webinar will continue to emphasize the importance of trust and make the case for why mobile viewability strategy is critical to your business. Next slide, please. The lack of trust in mobile advertising is exposed in recent industry revenue figures. So while there's tremendous growth in mobile ads, there's still a gap between where consumers are spending their time, primarily on mobile devices, and where marketers are attempting to reach those consumers. This mobile revenue gap is due in part to the marketer trust, or maybe called, better stated, distrust around mobile viewability. So increased trust between the marketer and the publisher will be one of the key factors that help the mobile ad industry to thrive over time. Let's start by understanding that mobile is different than other media platforms, and those differences are important when it comes to attracting ad dollars. Next slide, please. Studies by eMarketer, Seismic, and others show that in general, mobile ads are more viewable than their desktop counterparts. So for mobile publishers, this is a good thing. You know, we're likely all ahead of the game, and this is largely due to the fact that ads served alongside smartphone and tablet content are typically already above the fold. In many cases, mobile interactions are, by default, optimized for a smaller screen with an increased focus on the viewability of both content and advertising. So that's the good news. But because mobile publishers are generally ahead of the game, this doesn't mean that we've completely seized the business opportunity here. Like many things in mobile, viewability requires a uniquely mobile approach. So let's take a look back in time to see how viewability guidelines have evolved and how the guidelines for mobile viewability are currently being developed. Next slide. The story of mobile viewability starts nearly 10 years ago with our desktop ancestors. Viewability guidelines are not new to our industry. In fact, 10 years ago, the IAB first adopted the ad impression guidelines. And then 5 years ago, both desktop audience and desktop click guidelines were published. And just last year, the viewable impression standards for desktop display and video were released by the IAB and endorsed by the Media Ratings Council, or the MRC. And that brings us to today, where the industry is just getting started on mobile viewability guidelines. In May of this year, just a few months ago, the Media Ratings Council, or the MRC, released interim guidance on mobile viewability. This interim guidance provides the foundation for our future standards. At Millennial, we believe it's critical for mobile publishers to understand that these guidelines and really understand them as they're being developed, and build upon those guidelines to define revenue strategies which leverage the latest thinking on viewability. Next slide, please. So let's jump into the current definitions of viewability for both desktop and mobile, as defined by the MRC, or the Media Ratings Council. The MRC is a U.S. government agency whose mission is to provide audience measurement by setting industry standards and enforcing their compliance. To publishers and advertisers, the MRC serves as, for lack of a better term, the viewability police. A viewable impression is a metric of online advertising that indicates if a display ad is actually viewable to the user when it's served. More specifically, for online or desktop advertising, the IAB and the MRC define a viewable impression as one that's at least 50% visible for at least 1 second. Online video has more strict requirements, with 50% of the ad needing to be viewable for 2 seconds. In May of this year, the MRC's interim mobile guidelines were published. These are really just suggestions at this point, but they really look to create continuity with the work already done for online and desktop. The MRC published the following guidelines. For mobile web, 50% of the ad must be visible for 1 second. And for in-app inventory, the same is currently true, meaning 50% of the ad needs to be visible for 1 second. It's really important to know when talking about mobile viewability that the suggested MRC guidelines are going to change. The MRC expects to release an update to mobile guidelines by the end of Q3, or by October at the latest, and then again to issue updates no later than January, or by the end of Q4. The MRC is working with many members of the mobile ecosystem, including both Millennial Media and Integral Ad Science, to expand their interim guidance, and will move to accredit vendors for measurement of mobile viewability once standards have been finalized, which again is expected by the end of this year. Next slide, please. There are several trade associations involved in the creations of guidelines around viewability. As a publisher, it's important for you to understand who's driving these guidelines, as we know the standards will change over time. The MRC is currently leading the charge to establish standards and is working with other industry groups such as the ANA, the 4As, the IAB, each of whom manage their respective sides of the advertising supply chain. Millennial Media is working with the MRC as well as all the trade associations shown on this slide to address mobile measurement. This past May, Millennial Media announced a partnership with Integral Ad Science to certify campaign delivery and to begin to bring viewability into mobile. Earlier this year, we began running viewability audits across our publisher SDK footprint, which is currently integrated across 65,000 apps and sites. Those audits allowed us to verify viewable impressions and begin to understand how to navigate the very different and complex mobile environment. So the early results of our partnership with Integral Ad Science have proven very successful, and we look forward to continuing to lead the industry towards more viewable solutions. Next slide, please. We're very proud of our partnership with Integral Ad Science, as we both lead the industry towards mobile viewability measurement. So now I'd like to introduce Jason Cooper, who's the General Manager of Mobile at Integral Ad Science, to tell us more about their current research results and methodologies.
Thanks, Pat. It's fantastic to be part of this webinar, so thanks again for the opportunity to participate. So from a high level, here's how viewable impressions are measured in app. The first thing is the eligible campaigns are those that are delivered to static top or bottom banner or interstitial placements in the app. The second step, Integral provides a monitoring JavaScript pixel that is delivered alongside each ad unit. It gets delivered into the web view, which is created by the SDK, together with the creative tag, and this starts the process of determining viewability. The first step in that process is checking for the presence of mRate in the app. To be clear, mRate is to mobile what vPage is to video. It's a standard with which mobile ads are delivered into apps. Once the tag detects it's inside an mRate environment, it can then ask the question of viewability. Within the mRate standard, there is a method available, is viewable, that provides a snapshot into the viewable status of the ads at any point in time. And then once viewability has been established, the tag will poll at 1, 5, and 15-second intervals to determine how long the ad is in view for. So the metrics derived from this process are total impressions, measured impressions, in-view and out-of-view impressions, and those impressions that were in view for 1, 5, and 15 seconds. Back to you, Pat.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. So to provide advertisers with the certainty that they're increasingly demanding around viewability, Millennial Media, in partnership with Integral Ad Science, now offers a 100% viewability guarantee. So Millennials made the promise to deliver ad campaigns in full against verified viewable impressions as measured by Integral Ad Science. The market response thus far has been tremendous, and we believe this will really become the standard in our industry going forward. As a publisher, it's imperative that you understand your viewability scores and optimize your sites and apps to take advantage of the industry's migration towards 100% viewable impressions. To better understand your viewability score, please contact your Millennial Media account manager, who will be happy to share this data and work together to drive new viewability-based revenue opportunities. So now let's talk more about how publishers can take advantage of this market shift towards viewable solutions. As ad budgets and demand for a higher viewability standard move along, publishers and developers must accommodate the desire for viewable impressions or risk losing ad dollars. So as a mobile publisher, you have an opportunity to lead our industry. We have the feeling that we must move from a world in which viewability is inconsistently applied in mobile to a world where viewability is the basis for trust between publishers and advertisers. So we want to move away from where today some people may make the case that we've got quantity over quality in mobile, to a world where trust between publisher and advertiser is key. We'll begin to provide solutions for measuring viewability from the supply side, not just after the fact from the demand side. We'll want to take more proactive viewability strategies and not reactive post-campaign fire drills. We'll likely move to a world where media is priced not by the traditional CPM, CPC, or CPA, but by VCPM, or viewable CPM. And finally, we see viewability as a way for publishers to distinguish themselves, creating unique and valuable advertising opportunities, and thereby attracting more ad dollars. These are a few things for publishers to think about as they develop their unique approach to mobile viewability. Next slide, please. So now that we've been through the definition of mobile viewability and why it's important to publishers and the market and business opportunity and how we implement that with our partnership along with Integral Ad Science, you might be asking yourself as a publisher, how can I apply this to my business? And so as a mobile ad platform, Millennial Media is in a very unique position. We sit at the middle of a very robust marketplace. And this gives us the ability to observe best practices, to see who's doing it right, and frankly, who's doing it wrong, and then to highlight those trends to our partners. And so to get started on a path to mobile viewability, we're recommending the following best practices to our publisher partners. Number one, know your mobile viewability score. Know before you go. You work with your Millennial Media account manager to better understand your current viewability metrics. Our team of mobile experts can advise you on ways to improve your viewability performance and therefore qualify for additional mobile ad budgets. Number 2, don't predict the user's path. Only load banners on the screen when a user is present. While techniques like preloading an ad may seem like a visual enhancement, it can just as easily drag down your viewability score. And along these same lines, it's very important to disable things like refresh timers when an ad is no longer viewable on the page or to the user. Number 3, avoid below-the-fold banners. Where possible, implement persistent banners or adhesion-type banners within your user experience. This will ensure that the ad always remains visible to the user as they're navigating content. And then number 4, use fragments rather than activities for Android apps. And this is more of a technical recommendation, but fragments and activities are different methods used in the development of Android applications specifically. Apps with low viewability scores often use activities exclusively as a development method, and thereby generate new banner requests based upon a user's activity within the app. It's best to utilize fragments to optimize the frequency of ad calls. And Millennial can provide more technical and detailed guidance here as needed, so be sure to reach out with any questions on this 4th best practice. So in summarizing our recommended next steps, the viewability landscape is changing rapidly, and we know that new standards will emerge for mobile advertising. As more advertisers move towards expecting a higher standard of viewability, their advertising dollars will follow. It's in your best interest as a publisher to know the industry standards and to lead the migration towards more viewable solutions. To keep up with this very dynamic space, we offer many different resources at Millennial, including continual coverage on millennialmedia.com of our viewability approach, as well as updates from the industry. You can always reach out to your Millennial Media account manager for details on how viewability applies to you and your business, as well as referencing our monthly newsletters and other industry updates via social media to keep up on where mobile viewability stands. So let's recap the objectives that we set out to accomplish during the webinar today. At the beginning of the session, we had stated three objectives. The first being define mobile viewability. So we should now know that a mobile impression is quote-unquote viewable when 50% of the ad is on screen for at least 1 second. This is true in both mobile web and application contexts. Number 2, understand why mobile viewability is important to publishers. And we know that trust between the publisher and the advertiser is key. Increased trust is needed in closing this 25 billion mobile gap that exists in our market today. We believe that publishers who lead the charge to viewable solutions will be best positioned to capture increased mobile ad spend as that gap closes. Number 3, provide actionable next steps that publishers can implement immediately following this webinar. And let's just review those one more time. First, know before you go. Know your viewability score. Just call your Millennial account manager to get started on that process. Second, avoid below-the-fold banners. Third, don't try to predict the user's path and only show ads when they're viewable to the user. And lastly, when developing on Android, use fragments rather than activities wherever possible. So we hope that this presentation has been informative, and I hope that we've been able to accomplish the objectives that we set out in the beginning. Again, we'd love to hear your feedback, so please utilize the chat feature in the WebEx to submit any questions or comments you may have at this time. So now we've set aside some time for Q&A. My colleague at Millennial Media, Haley Davidow, will be facilitating the Q&A portion. So Haley, do we have any questions?
Okay, so first question, Jason, I think this is for you, is mobile web measurable, and if so, how?
Sure thing. Mobile web is measurable. It's measured using what we call the geometric method. It uses JavaScript to determine the viewport or the number of available pixels on the screen at any time. And that JavaScript also gives us positional information, kind of like an XY coordinates, into where the banner is in relation to the rest of the page layout, so we can detect whether the banner is above or below the fold and what percentage it is in view. There are some challenges around that. There's an iframe challenge, so and this affects everyone in the industry, that sometimes it's difficult to sort of break out of this iframe, but when the banner is served into a friendly iframe environment, then we can measure viewability.
Thanks, Jason. And a follow-up to that is, how do we measure viewability for mobile video?
So right now, that's something which is in development. So for mobile web video, we can use something in development is any HTML5-based player that produces vast or runs vast or VPaid tags. We can measure, or we'll measure very soon, the key metrics in there. So quartiles, percentage viewed. In terms of mobile app, that's still in development. There has been an update to or an addendum to the MRAID guidelines. So there's something called MRAID meets VPaid. And what it means is the industry will be able to deliver MRAID compliant tags that also can track VPaid events as well. So that's going to be a real winner, I think, for everyone in the industry. And it will mean some upgrades to some of the sort of SDKs. But it's something which has been released, and we'll slowly see adoption over the next sort of 6 months, I think.
Okay, thanks. So does Millennial Media offer guarantees on both in-app and mobile web inventory? Pat, that one's for you.
Yep, sorry, just coming off of mute. So right now, the way that we've rolled out our viewability package is via the Millennial Media SDK. So we work with Integral Ad Science to integrate their technology via our SDK. Our SDK is used within in-app inventory. So therefore, our viewability guarantee is actually working against in-app inventory, as far as I understand it. So that's where we're at today.
Okay. And another question here, I think for Jason. What are early mobile in-app viewability benchmarks?
Sure. So we've published Q1 benchmarks for this year for in-app viewability. There are two metrics of interest. The first one is what we call a measured impression. So that is the opportunity to ask about viewability. And that is derived by the tag being able to detect it's in an MRAID compliant environment. So once the tag detects that, then we call that a measured impression. And then straight after that, we ask the question of viewability. So we ask the MRAID ad container, are you in view? And we get a response back for that. So in terms of measured, we're looking at 81% measured rate. And for viewability, I'm sorry, it's about 85% measured rate for the Q1 benchmark and 81% viewable for an app through our benchmarks.
Okay, Jason, another one for you. Does IAS have the capability to measure viewability on non-SDK integrated publishers?
So non-MRAID SDK, we cannot do that now. We are working with the MRC and the IAB on an initiative that will allow us to develop a standard that can be adopted by any SDK vendor, regardless of flavor. So there are some publishers in the market who don't follow MRAID, and this initiative will allow them to adopt a method of independently being able to provide a viewable numbers outside of MRAID. So that's something we're working on. Hopefully that's something we'll see in the next sort of 6 months.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question here is, will mobile video impressions be replaced for video views, or percentage of video viewed in the future? So Pat, that one's for you.
Sorry, Haley, can you just repeat it one more time?
Sure. Will mobile video impressions be replaced for video views or percentage of video viewed in the future?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I do know that just. Do you have a comment there, Jason?
Hey, Pat, Jason, this is Andrew. I'll sort of jump in and field this one. And for everyone on the call, I work very closely with Pat and Jason on a lot of the viewability efforts here at Millennial Media. The question is, will mobile video impressions be replaced for video views or percentage of video views in the future? You know, the answer to that question is really grounded in two things. One is, you know, the ability to measure mobile viewability for mobile. As Jason mentioned earlier, that methodology is still being developed, as well as, you know, will be propagated across the industry as that is sort of going out. Once that methodology is defined, working with both the supply side and the demand side to determine what the appropriate sort of mechanism is for transaction. It could be percentage of view, could be how long the video is viewed. There's a number of different things, but all grounded in the methodology, which, as we roll out, we'll be fully transparent about, both with everyone on the supply side and on the demand side. So more to come there, but that is something that will come over the next couple months.
Okay. So next question is, how will this impact my eCPM? Pat, that one's for you.
Yeah, I mean, so we see this movement towards viewability as a very positive trend for publishers as it relates to yield and CPMs. And naturally, marketers will be willing to pay for more viewable impressions, and so because the thinking being that they'll perform better, being that they're 100% viewable. So we've seen a premium in the market for our viewable impressions, and we think that that premium accrues to the benefit of our publisher partners. Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Pat.
just one further comment there. You know, I think in the future, you know, this becomes the standard. You know, viewability is the currency, you know, in our industry, and that, you know, publishers managing non-viewable impressions, you know, will sort of fall by the wayside. So, you know, we're firmly committed to initiatives around moving the industry towards more viewable solutions. We just think it's the best path forward.
Okay. So next question for Jason is, does IAS offer pre-bid viewability targeting? And if so, how does it work between using historical viewability data and bid request-based data?
Yeah, it's on the roadmap. It's something we're hoping to launch later this year. The idea is we'll provide rolled up scores for apps, what we call bundle ID. So that's kind of like the unique identifier for the app. So each app would have a rolled up viewability score. And you're right, it will be based on historical data. It will be based on what we've seen previously through traffic which has hit the platform, and that will be made available in a pre-bid type scenario. So, you know, through Millennial Media and other sort of mobile DSPs and online DSPs as well.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we have one more question here. Can you speak to the inconsistencies in measuring mobile display across technologies and vendors, and how big of a problem is this? If so, when will the industry feel confident in technology measurement across the board? Pat, that one's for you. And Jason. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, sure. I think what we've seen is over the last 12 months, we've all been very aware of the issue of viewability online, and as a brand or advertiser, they're thinking, well, look, if I'm booking across multiple media types, display, mobile, and video, I just want to understand, what the viewable state is of my ad. So, and until the MRC, have really sort of got together and come up with a standard sort of, a finite, concrete definition, we've really had to make best efforts to figure out how to get this. And I think what we've been doing over the last 12 months is tapping into this MRAID standard, which is reliable, it's widely adopted, it's governed by the IAB, and there's a working group that supports it. So this is, and it's a fairly mature sort of standard as well. So we felt this is a very robust way of measuring viewability. There may be other vendors out there who are doing something similar, but I think, as we mentioned before earlier in the presentation, that the MRC came out early May with some revised guidelines, and they talk about calculating pixels in view in an app. We're going to have to build out some new sort of technologies to meet that guidance. And that's something which is being developed right now. But until we get to that, you're probably going to see some inconsistency. If there are other vendors in the market, doing in-app viewability, mobile web viewability, then it really is about asking the question, figuring out the methodology, really sort of getting to the bottom of how that figure is derived, and then asking the question of other vendors as well. So there's a kind of a bench. You've got a view on that. You understand fully how that's been calculated. I think that's probably the best approach. Pat, you have any further comments?
No, yeah, just that the methodologies for determining viewability in mobile, are all under development now. Both Millennial Media and Integral Ad Science are kind of taking an early position on this and trying to drive the industry forward. We're very closely connected to the MRC as well as other industry groups to make sure that as guidelines change, and again, I think the MRC, when they published in May, their interim guidance also forecasted an update to the guidance at the end of Q3 and then again at the end of Q4. So as this interim guidance moves closer to becoming our standards, the definitions may shift a bit, and the accepted methodologies will change. So it really is important as a publisher or as an app developer to stay tuned to changes in the space so that you can continue to stay ahead of the industry and capture your fair share or greater than your fair share of ad dollars as it relates to viewability. So, Haley, no further questions?
Nope, that was the last question, so back to you.
Okay, great. So, yeah, just in wrapping up, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending today. Hopefully we were able to teach you a little bit about our work on mobile viewability and that the information here was useful for you. A couple of parting thoughts. One, work with Millennial to understand your viewability score. It's a capability that we have in-house that we've built together with Integral Ad Science. Understanding that score is the basis of moving forward and improving your viewability when it comes to mobile. So if nothing else, that's a great next step to take from today's event. And one last time, thank you to Jason from Integral Ad Science. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to participate and for your questions. We look forward to hearing from you in the future on this topic. All right, that's the end of the webinar, so thanks everybody.